Welcome to Read Your Comics. Today I'm going to be checking out some Joe Maneely art. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Daryl. I'm the host of Read Your Comics. I'm going to be looking at this free comic book day edition of some stories from Atlas Comics, published by Fantagraphics. I'm not very familiar with Joe Maneely's art. I know who he is. He was kind of Stan Lee's go-to guy before Jack Kirby came back to Marvel in the later 1950s. Maneely mostly just worked in the mid 40s through the 50s when he died tragically when he fell between some train cars traveling between New York and New Jersey. It's a really sad tale, but Stan Lee, in hindsight, thought that Joe Maneely would have been right up there with Jack Kirby in the Marvel age of comics had he not passed so tragically. You know, the 1950s, it's not an era of comics that I'm super familiar with, like as far as like have read and looked at much myself. Not a lot of superheroes in that era, and in fact Maneely only did a couple of Submariner covers, was his only superhero work. Most of his stuff was in these horror stories, crime stories, true life stories, that kind of stuff, which is just genres that I never really delved into. Although when I would see panels and stuff, I would respect the art in it. It's like I said, it's just not stuff I really spent money on to read and really look into. Fortunately, Free Comic Book Day rolls around once a year, and Fantagraphics is collecting these stories from Atlas Comics and putting them in, nicer hardcover books. They're doing it probably in a proper way that Marvel is not capable of doing for some reason. So I picked this up. I don't usually even make a big effort to go to Free Comic Book Day, but I saw this was coming out, and it was definitely one that when I went last year, I wanted to pick this one up. This cover is not Maneely. This is a Bill Everett cover for one of the stories in the back, but most of this book is Maneely, including this first story, The Raving Maniac, or The Editor. And this is written by Stan Lee, and it's a lot of this storyline actually is very applicable to today. One thing I want to say too is when looking up stuff about Maneely, apparently he was not a detailed penciler, but he inked himself. And his pencils were almost non-existent. He just kind of did basic layouts, and then most of his drawing he did in the inking stage. So I found that kind of interesting, and when I look at this, I take that into mind, so probably to lay out this page, he just did like some, basic shapes for figures, and then did all the detail work in the inking stage. This story is almost a response to Frederick Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent 2. This man comes into a comic strip office, which I guess this is supposed to be Stan Lee in a way, and complaining about like the monster stories in the books. You get a chance to see Maneely do, some monster stuff, even though that's not the gist of the story. It's like a real life story, right? Pretty cool details on these guys. I mean, it definitely makes me want to look more at his stuff if he did more monster books. I don't know that he did, though. It seems like most of the stuff I read that he did was all, like I said, the true crime, the romance, some war stuff, more like everyday stuff, so less fantasy, I guess. Look at the lighting on this face here. That definitely kind of looks like a young Stan Lee, too. And even this panel, I like the lighting on this one as well. And again, this is something that Fantagraphics is doing well as far as like recoloring this stuff. I don't know that, I'm guessing they're taking the original and just trying to emulate it as best they can. Whereas had Marvel been in charge of this would have just been a flat, bright yellow. And this back here, this green, would have been a very bright green. And a lot of the nuance of the art would have been lost for that. This light blue would have been flat without the halftone dots and stuff. Marvel's just terrible at that. So I'm so glad that it was Fantagraphics that requested to do this and do it in a cleaner way. So this, like I said, this is basically the Stan Lee's answer to Frederick Wortham of him having a confrontation with a reader over the content of their magazines. And it turns out the guy's crazy. He's escaped from like an asylum and got in there, and they come to get him and take him back. So, kind of like a wink, wink, nod, nod. That guy's crazy. Look at the background of this. That's not like Zipatone or anything. I think that's just like an inked background where he left enough white coming through to give it some texture, I think. Because when you look there, it's not very even. That's wild. if he inked that texture in there. So that's a Joe Maneely story. This one, I believe, this one's a Gene Colan story. So this is a very early Gene Colan story. And had you not told me this is Gene Colan and I just looked at it, I would not have guessed it, because when I think of Gene Colan, I do think of like heavy tonal pencils, really organic lines. Everything's kind of in motion always, even things that are supposed to be static. This is a fun story where this guy has gone to the doctor. He is told he has a condition where he's not going to live that long, and he's a coward. He doesn't want to die slowly like that. So he's hired a killer to kill him by exactly 2:00. And he's like, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, because I'm a coward, I'll try to get out of it. You go through with it no matter what. And they're like, okay, bub, whatever you want to do. And then after he sends the hired killer off, he gets a call from his doctor saying like, hey, there was, just wanted to follow up with you. And he's like, well, what else is there to say? You already said I don't have long to live. He's like, what? No, you can live a long life. Yeah, you have a heart condition, but as long as you, eat right and get a good amount of exercise and stuff, you'll live for several more years. Like what? Like what are you freaking out about? So then he's on a panic about the guy coming to get him. So he goes to confront him first. He's like, no. And he's like, whatever you said, not to do anything. So he's on the run from this guy the whole time. And it's basically like a paranoia story. But again, I don't see Gene Colan in these pages. Like maybe kind of in this one with the hands. But I would like to know what his age was when he did this compared to like what I think of his Daredevil work and Tomb of Dracula, etc. All that stuff that he did that's so like hyper detailed, and this is just kind of empty. Anyway, as the clock gets closer to 2:00, and here comes the guy to get him, and it makes him have a heart attack. He's like bong bong, and he has a heart attack. But then it turned out he was imagining the guy. It was just some like dude in the park, and he's like, "What happened to that guy? I don't know. He just kind of killed over." And then you cut down to the guy that's a killer, and he's like, that guy paid me up front. I wasn't going to try to go kill him. Like, I was just going to run off. So, little twist there. Very Twilight Zone-ish, I guess you'd say. Or Hitchcockian. Another artist I know the name, but I'm not overly familiar with, is Basil Wolverton, who does this Where Monsters Dwell story, which, of course, would become a reprint title in the 1970s. Interesting story here too about a guy that basically creates some projector that opens up like another dimension, and it's like a warped dimension where things are like monstrous and stuff. And this journalist is there to see this scientist do it, but the scientist actually has like a vindictive streak where he's been called crazy and stuff. So as punishment, he's sending these people into this realm, people that he has had a grudge with. Some great panel work on this too. Like you see the projector there looking into the world. I love this one of the bright light, and then the guy wakes up and then his face is all distorted, and so it makes people's faces, or it just distorts them when they go to this other dimension, right? And he starts finding some other people that the scientist had sent there. They have to take on these monsters. Look at this snake creature. It's almost flat, like almost like a tapeworm, but with a crazy mouth in the front. And they're able to fend it off to escape it. But there's also these creatures. I wish you could have gotten a little bit better look at them, but maybe that's part of the mystery, is you don't really know exactly what's after you, right? So he finds the other people, and they're in a cave, and they've been there for who knows how long. Look at the lines right there. Maybe they are just straight up scanning the originals of this and not recoloring it, at least for some of them, because that looks like print lines right there. But then cleaning up the margins to put it back on these white pages, that's pretty slick. Or that looks pretty good. Because there's definitely like it looks more like old print here too, which is hard to emulate with modern coloring. So yeah, maybe they just took scans. I love this face. That is a great face. like a distorted human. And I like how the panels are like, it breaks up to isolate that one, and doing it again over here too. As this story goes along, I think the smaller panels get better and better. I like this one a lot. The monsters are, they're all right. I mean, I like that snake one. This one's a little plain. I kind of like these guys, but I just wanted a better look at them. So they basically devise a plan. They see a flash of light whenever the scientists send somebody into this dimension, and they know that, or they gamble that perhaps they can go back when that light flashes. So they make a run for it, but there's also the monsters and stuff coming after them as they head out there, and they're exposing themselves and stuff. So they head out to do it, and the one guy from the beginning of the story that we're really following, he makes it, and he gets through, and he gets the scientist and turns it back on him and sends him in. And at first, he's like, well, he watches the scientist get killed by the other monsters. So they get their revenge on him for sending them in there. And initially, a couple of the monsters get through, and he's able to kill one. But then the story wraps up with a moral conundrum for the reader. The other people that the scientist had trapped in there are still there, and he's like, should I open the thing and potentially let more monsters into the world to help save the people, or should I just I'm out and I'm safe? Should I just go on? And it's like, what would you do? So kind of a neat, conundrum for the reader to contemplate as they, end the story. Another great distorted face here. And I think somewhere in here too, he says that the distortion's only going to be temporary. How he knows that, I don't know. For all he knows, he's stuck like that forever. Anyway, I like that. I do like the story, and I do like how it ends on the question to the reader to leave open discussion, I guess, between, kids that were reading this back in the day. Back to a Manili story. I really liked this one for the art. I'm not really a war comic guy, but this is the one that I looked at and I said, I see the comparisons to Kirby, to where if he hadn't died, I could see it. He probably would have been right up there with Kirby. And I mean, imagine a bullpen of Manili, Kirby, and Ditko steering the ship of those early Marvels. But here's something to think about too. Stan Lee really liked Joe Manili. Kirby kind of came crawling into Marvel because he'd had a falling out with DC over Sky Masters, his newspaper strip and stuff. Kirby really had nowhere else to go. And Marvel at the time, which wasn't Marvel yet, had a very strained budget. They had actually just laid off a bunch of workers, and Stan Lee had stockpiled all these stories that Martin Goodman had told him, like, just run these stories. Get rid of your bullpen. Don't purchase any more new stories. Run what we have, if that's enough to get us through the next few months or whatever. And they were on the verge of closing up shop when Kirby came in there. And then as the story goes, Stan Lee says he wanted to do a comic his own way, and he came up with the Fantastic Four. Kirby claims that he came up with the Fantastic Four. Anyway, how would comic history have changed if they had Joe Manili still there too? Would Jack Kirby have gotten the assignments that he did had Manili still been there to be on the payroll? Because Stan Lee liked Manili a lot, and I mean, I'm sure he liked Jack, but they had their issues in the past, in the long past. Anyway, let's jump into this Manili story. Again, this is the one that I really looked at and said, wow, I could see where he would have, I don't want to say challenged Jack Kirby, but been right up there with him. I mean, you look at the detail of some of the, like even these like small panels like this. So this is a story of there's troops. They're in Korea, I believe. It's Korean War story. They're behind enemy lines, and I think they're surrounded. And some of them go out, and one guy's supposed to stay up and kind of be watch, and he ends up dozing off and loses his platoon. But it's just all the little details of the soldiers, the rain dripping off their helmets, the facial expressions, and again, knowing that he wasn't really doing heavy pencils. That most of this was just straight up done with ink. I mean, it's probably where stuff gets really black like this that you could see that come through. I like the coloring on this one of the explosion makes it all like bright yellow. So solid coloring on this. You know, they did make the Asian people yellow there. I don't know how much of that you can say. The printing technique of the time, they had trouble with flesh tones. I mean, white people were pink for the most part. But yeah, that's kind of that's one of those bygone era things. You just kind of have to shake your head at. I like the lettering up here too. And I wonder who did that. I wonder who if he did that or not. When it goes across the panels like that, I often wonder. And a lot of this is all introspective of this one guy who's supposed to be holding the line. That feels Kubertish, which is somebody I think about in war comics a lot, is Joe Kubert. So here he is setting up his gun. He's supposed to guard it, but he starts to drift off and he falls asleep. And then when he wakes up, he's not sure. He hears something. Look at that tired face. Man, the facial expressions in this. And he dozes off again. He keeps waking up. He keeps dozing off and waking up, dozing off and waking up. And the rain coming down. Some of the rain there is the coloring too, with just the streaks of blue. Help create that illusion. So he wakes up and he hears something and he just fires because he could have been firing on his own guys. He got lucky and it was not his own guys. And that's how the story ends. It kind of ends too with he's not exactly sure if his guys have made it or not, or if he's been left out there alone all of a sudden. Now this story is also Joe Maneely. So this is a nice little preview book of like really getting some range of what Maneely was capable of doing. We got this like hyper detailed story here and the one in the front, and now he's going to go straight up cartooning. This is obviously a Dennis the Menace parody, Pascal the Rascal, and he does it under a different name, Yank Kitchen. And I mean he does it well. This would have been perfect for like a Mad Magazine satire kind of thing. And it's straight up Dennis the Menace, but a little worse. He's worse than Dennis the Menace. He is like completely awful. And the dad is trying to come up with a comic strip to like provide for his family, and you keep thinking he's got the idea of like, oh, my son who's like, he's a menace, so I'm gonna do something about that. But that's not what he comes up with. I mean, he's got like a pet snake, painted wet paint on the wall. I mean, and the dad's just kind of like, ha ha, it's driving the mother mad. But and so his first comic strip is actually Prince Valiant. And anyway, he keeps failing at these like well-known comic strips, and probably ones that these guys admired too. Until he comes up with one based on his son, which is, I guess, essentially Dennis the Menace. But then his son decides he's going to start being good from that point on. But yeah, again, showing the range, Joe Maneely of the hyper detailed stuff to this cartoony stuff. So this would definitely be more of a loose pencils that didn't even need much inking. This is the Bill Everett story that was on the cover, The Kiss of Death. Bill Everett, of course, the creator of Submariner. Pretty wild story here of this couple they're coming to witness this magician guy, and he's conjuring up some lost souls. So, and it's a pretty neat story. I love the detail of the skeletons and stuff on this. And it's a pretty interesting story. This old man also comes to see, and they're just there to witness it. And he tells the story about how he was stationed in France, and him and his other friends all fell in love with the same woman, and they basically all agreed that uh, whoever is alive at the end, like whoever lives the longest, will get to be with her. So the other guys eventually died as they grew old. They didn't try to murder each other or anything, but um, they all had died, and he was the last one. So he wanted to find where the woman is now. And I mean, look at this guy. Look at his hair. I'm bald like this. I could do that, right? Great face there, too. I love these close-up faces in these old comics like that when they would do stuff like that. There's his old friends as they come through, and they're like, yep, you're the last one. You made it. It turns out the woman had died, too. And there she comes. Kiss me, my love. I love that one, too. When the eyes are all bugging out like that, like in fright almost. It's awesome. Anyway, she turns out to be dead, and the old man, he basically removes his face and is going to be with her too. And that's the end of that story. So the kiss of death, like, but he's happy. He's happy to be with her. And here's the collection of the different books by Fantagraphics. I don't have any. I would like to get some, but you know, between these and like the EC books and stuff, and just all the other stuff that I want, right? That I'd like to just have in my own personal library. It's just the funds only go so far, right? That one looks really good though. Anyway, really kind of some of my first exposure to Joe Maneely here. I really enjoyed it. I do want to check out some more of his stuff. Maybe I should get one of these Fantagraphic books because he's an interesting part of comics history of what could have been. I mean, it's just hard to think, like, how would Marvel have changed if Maneely had been alive? Would he have contributed as much as Jack Kirby did? Would Kirby have contributed as much as he did? Would there have been enough work for Kirby to contribute as much as he did available with Maneely there too? And it's just a fascinating parallel universe of where Joe Maneely lived. That's all I got for this one. Until next time, read your comics. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my breakdown of this issue, you can support the channel by hitting subscribe. It costs you nothing and helps other comic fans find the channel. You can also visit readyourcomics.com for cool merch, like this. Read Your Comics isn't just a brand, it's a mantra. And when you wear a Read Your Comics shirt, you are helping spread the word. For more classic comics conversation, be sure to follow me on Instagram at read.your.comics. And if you're still here, why not watch one of my older videos? Here or here.